But once I knew who she was, then she let me feel her energy. And all of a sudden, I just got this huge wave of incredible, ecstatic love and joy and peace, very expansive, light-filled. It was beautiful.
Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. We are exploring the mystical side of life once again this week. If you enjoy our conversations, remember to subscribe, share with a friend. Today, I have Evidential medium Kelly Palmatier with me. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Linda.
I love talking to psychics and mediums, and I'm always curious how their path unfolded. How did that door open for you?
So I do believe that everybody has some psychic ability. It's just like intuition, we all have some level of it. It's just that for some people, we may have a stronger natural proclivity for it, and then others, we may actively work at developing those muscles. So in my case, I did have some experiences when I was a child, little things that made me think that maybe I was psychic, but then I just had a real intense interest, and I would read books and practice things, try things out. And I really strongly developed it all throughout high school and college. And then I would just do readings for family and friends off and on for 30 something years. But it was actually in 2017 when I was sitting at the base of a waterfall, meditating and praying and getting in touch with nature and spirit. And I just asked for a sign. I said, I want to make a difference in the world. If there's something I can do to help others that I'm not already doing, please give me a sign and I will try to listen to what you say. Well, I was expecting something subtle, but what I got was a direct answer on the spot, just popped into my head, telling me to become a medium. So I was like, oh, okay, how shall I do that? And the answer just popped into my head. Read books, spend time in meditation, connect with other psychics and mediums. So I started doing all that right away. By the end of the month, I was channeling.
That's pretty amazing. Do you have any inclination who put that message in your mind?
Well, since I wasn't a medium at the time, I wasn't able to pinpoint it as easily as I might if the situation were to happen today. But certainly, I feel like my mother may have been involved because my mother is in spirit and had been in spirit at that time. And she and I were very close, and she was always nurturing and, happy to give me advice if she had ideas for me.
And as you were developing your intuition, before you had that moment, you did enhance your intuition. What did that look like for you? How did you know that what you were doing was actually opening that intuitive window for you?
So the main thing that I did is I just read books and I tried stuff. And I tried over and over. And as a teenager, one of the things that was really cool, this was long before the days of caller ID. The phone would ring and I would answer it, greeting my friends by name. And my friends were always like, oh, how did you know? Like, so it was really cool. And, as a teenager, being cool is like the ultimate validation, right? So I just kept going and kept trying things. And then when I was in college, I did take a year abroad and I studied at the University of Kent at Canterbury in England. And while there, I studied with Professor Chris Cherry. I took a course called The Self, Issues in Religion, Philosophy, and Parapsychology. So I got to learn a little bit more about parapsychology when I was over there. And I also met Jo Wynn. She is a mentor of mine. She's very psychic. And she lived in Sussex, England, still does. We actually still talk on Zoom now. And she taught me so much. She taught me to read tarot cards and just a lot of the basics about working with energy.
I love the telephone game because it's a playful, fun way to
Mhm.
start exploring.
Yes.
Can you tell us the difference between a psychic and a medium?
Yeah. So a psychic is just someone who picks up on information outside of the five physical senses. They may have a variety of ways that they do that, whether it's clairvoyance for seeing, clairaudience for hearing, etc. But they just pick up on information outside of the five physical senses, whereas a medium is someone who can use those skills to connect with loved ones who've crossed over. So a little fun fact, every medium is a psychic, but not every psychic is a medium.
As an evidential medium, perhaps you could explain exactly what that is for us.
Well, when we think about a medium, we think about someone saying, "Ooh, I'm getting the spirit of your grandmother, and she loves you, and she's proud of you, and she's well, and she's happy." Well, that's all great information, but it's also very general. And so any con artist could tell you that. And as long as they're talking about someone old enough to expect it to be, your grandmother's in spirit, then they're going to be right. And for a lot of people, that may be meaningful. But when you're talking about being evidential, that's when you bring through little details that are evidential details to sort of validate that it really is the person that you're thinking of. So, for example, when I'm doing my mediumship work, I often will pick up on things like a spirit's appearance, their personality, how they passed, and I even get exact names in about 60% of my readings.
When you get these messages, are you hearing them or just have a knowing? Do you see them? How does it come through for you?
In my case, I am an empath, so I do feel the emotions of others. I'm clairvoyant, so I psychically see images. Clairaudient, so I hear messages. Clairalient, so I get psychic smells. Clairsentient, so I physically feel the energy. And also claircognizant, so sometimes I just know things. But everybody's a little bit different. In my case, clairgustance, which is psychic taste, that's one that I don't get very often, or I actually get it often, but it's only one taste that I get, which is like a fuzzy taste in my mouth for someone who was a smoker or a coffee drinker.
That's really interesting. Would you actually hear the voice of the person crossed over?
Yeah, so when I talk about the different senses, it's not like I'm experiencing it with my physical senses. It's more like think of the happy birthday song, think of the melody, think of the words. You can kind of hear it in your head without actually hearing it with your physical ears. So it's very similar to that with all of the different senses. Now, for me, the exception is clairsentience because it does feel, there's a physicality to that. But that's one of my strongest senses. So what I've done is I've developed different symbols around that. So for example, if I feel something in my head, if I feel it on the front of my head, that's a sign for someone who had an issue with brain function or brain chemistry. If I feel something on my left temple, that's a sign of someone who had a stroke. Mediums will just kind of work with whatever their tools are the strongest.
I think that's really important for everyone to note, to develop that intuitive dictionary or psychic dictionary, because we're always getting symbols and it might not mean the same thing for the same person.
That's true. Absolutely. Different people are going to have different interpretations of the symbols. When I first became a medium, I was more free form and it's just like, what am I going to get? We'll see. And then over time, as I read more books and I got more experience, I started to understand that developing a variety of symbols really facilitates a much stronger connection, a much faster connection.
And again, that's a symbol, I believe, that spirit can fine tune its message to you because you've made that interpretation. So you've declared, let's say, or come to the awareness that this symbol means this. So if that's the message, it knows exactly how to give it to you, right?
Yes, but what's interesting is it goes both ways. It's like I'm communicating with spirit, and that works even when I'm developing my symbols. So sometimes I come up with a symbol and I tell spirit, "Hey, this is a symbol I want to use." And sometimes spirit gives me something and they're like, "Hey, here's a symbol we're going to use." And it's really interesting when that happens. Like for example, I wanted to get a symbol for somebody that passed suddenly versus somebody who was sick for a while. So I'd heard another medium, I believe it was Teresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, on one of her shows. She said something about spirit is showing me the snapping of the fingers, which means someone passed very suddenly, here today, gone tomorrow. And I thought, well, that's cool. I need a symbol for sudden and I need a symbol for prolonged. So I thought, okay, so I can visually see someone snapping their fingers. That works. But for me, clairvoyance isn't quite as strong as clairsentience, which is the feel. So I said, all right, spirit, I want sudden to be either that I'll see a snapping or I'll feel something in my left hand because it's related. Or for prolonged, I was like, well, what can I do for prolonged? What's visual, a visualization of something that's prolonged? And I thought of, this is kind of funny, those old toys from decades ago, Stretch Armstrong. And you would take the toy and you could stretch its arms way out. So I thought, okay, so if someone's been sick for a while, I want to visually see a Stretch Armstrong doll, or I need something clairsentience for feeling. I will physically feel something in my arms. I told Spirit that, and I have consistently been using those symbols for years now. I will say in my case, when I told Spirit about it, I gave the choice of the visual or the physical. I never have seen a Stretch Armstrong doll. I've never seen someone visually snapping their fingers. I've always just felt something in my hand or felt something in my arms. But that's just a way of me working with spirit where I'm telling them something that I want. Conversely, there are times when spirit will give me something. So, for example, one day, this was many years ago, I was doing a reading for someone and I felt a little something in my face, my nose, like a little tickle or something. So I didn't know what it was. I just said to my client, I'm getting a little sensation like in my nose and my face. And they're like, oh yeah, he shot himself in the face. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it was like later that same week, I was doing a reading for someone and I felt that again. I was like, oh, I'm feeling something in my face. He didn't shoot himself, did he? Yeah, he did. So ever since then, this tickle in my nose has become a symbol, and it's kind of stretched out a little bit, where it's now my symbol for responsibility, where someone's taking responsibility for their passing. It doesn't have to be being shot, but that just is a way that spirit told me a symbol.
I think that's perfect and a great reminder that it is a two-way collaboration.
Yeah.
So if someone comes to you for connecting with a specific person that's crossed over, is that something possible, or do you just open and whoever comes, comes?
Yeah. So I always tell people I cannot guarantee who will come through. That's up to spirit. But the nice thing is, I can kind of issue the invitation, and most of the time, fingers crossed, knock on wood, most of the time, the ones that we really want to connect with the most do come through. The thing is, if you go to somebody and the medium immediately jumps in with, well, who do you want to talk to? That actually can be a red flag for someone that is using techniques. It might be hot reading, it might be cold reading, but something that might not be ethical or legitimate. So you have to be careful around that. Usually what I do when I'm in a client session is I'll start off just by asking spirit who's here and listing off the symbols that I'm getting. And thankfully, most of the time, the ones we really wanted to hear from are the ones I'm getting already. But then I'll ask my clients, is there someone else you were really hoping to connect with who we haven't heard from yet? And then I can kind of issue that invitation. And sometimes we'll immediately start getting validation, evidential details for that person, but not always. You just have to kind of go with the flow. Energy ebbs and flows, and spirits, they do their own thing.
I'm smiling really because I've had a number of mediumship readings over the years, and I seem to get the most, I'll say, unusual guests, not the close family members, but I'll maybe get like my second cousin or someone that hasn't played a huge role in my life, and maybe even someone I can't even pinpoint in the moment. So I'll have to, call my sister up and say, there was a woman that started with J. Who could that be?
Well, I always like to tell people to remind people that even the very best psychics and mediums are not going to be 100%. If we were always 100%, that's science. That's not psychic, right? And so I always like to allow people just to understand that what I'm getting, what's coming through, it might not always apply to you, and that's okay. I never want my clients to feel like we have to force something to make it fit. And by the way, sometimes I might actually literally, this has happened a few times where my clients, my future clients' spirits start trying to come through early. So sometimes I'll start getting things that are evidential and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But then, 20 minutes later, my next client, they're like, oh, my Uncle Joe, yeah.
That's hilarious, right? Because of course there's no such thing as time.
Time is definitely different on the other side.
Have you ever connected with any celebrities or historical figures?
Yes, yes, I have. Um, I will say that I recently connected with someone and it was a spontaneous reading for somebody at a conference. And this was the conference of the Real Screen Summit. So that's where a conference full of television producers, both television show producers and network executives, go to the Real Screen Summit for unscripted shows. So I was at this conference and I was having lunch with a lovely young lady, and she was struggling. And I did a spontaneous reading, and it turns out that the person I was channeling, who'd had esophageal cancer, was a very famous director who also had spent some time in front of the camera. I would love to name drop, but it was a confidential reading, so I'm not going to do that. But that was pretty cool because I knew who that was and I was a fan of his, but he just came through like a regular guy. And then also just this past week, I did a reading for a client of mine who is a very famous actress in New York, been on many hit television shows. But again, it was personal, so I can't disclose. I can't do another name drop here. The one name drop that I can do that isn't going to violate anyone's confidence is the Blessed Mother Mary. I actually channeled the Blessed Mother Mary, which shocked me at the time because I was, so humble and thinking, why me? I mean, I'm just a little, just a little peon, and it's this amazing spiritual icon, but it was just very valid at that time. So the way that happened is I had a couple of clients, a lovely couple, came to me, and I was channeling their son who had died in a boating accident. And, I was getting lots of validating information. And then I got my symbol for mother. And then I heard the name Mary. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting my symbol for mother. I'm hearing the name Mary. Who's Mary? At this point, I've got the son's parents are both here living. So obviously his mother isn't Mary. Maybe it's her mother or so I'm just, who's Mary? And they said, it's the Blessed Mother Mary. And I was like, oh, they said, yes. So we had been praying that she would be with our son. And so that was the validation for them. And plus, they'd had another reading previously with some other medium on the phone who had said that the Blessed Mother Mary was with their son. So it was like a double validation there. And so the way she came through to me was just the way I would normally communicate my symbol for mother, the name Mary. But once I knew who she was, then she let me feel her energy. And all of a sudden, I just got this huge wave of incredible, ecstatic love and joy and peace, very expansive, light-filled. It was beautiful.
Beautiful. How did you ever carry on the rest of your reading?
Every day when I do readings, it's an honor to be able to connect with spirit, to connect with my clients. And even though, like in that moment, I had a beautiful divine moment, I feel like everything that I do working with my clients and working with spirit is divine. So I just said thank you. And then it, slowly eased up and I just carried on.
Have you ever connected with a spirit that was, let's say, lost?
So in my case, when I'm doing readings, I ask for only positive messages that serve highest good. And when I'm connecting with spirit, I ask for spirits of high vibration or benevolent intent. So I'm never going to connect with spirits that are so lost that there's something, where it might be anything less than beneficial to my client. Having said that, I feel like every spirit, when they first cross over in particular, they're going to go through a period of transition. I feel that spirits do continue to learn and grow on the other side. And there have been plenty of times where I've gone to connect with a spirit and I've been able to acknowledge I'm feeling this energy of learning and growing on the other side.
And when you're going about your day-to-day life, if you're out in the world, do you ever come across spirits like the Long Island medium will often get messages while she's out shopping? Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, in the case of the Long Island medium, obviously that's kind of the shtick of the show, right? And so I don't know what went on behind the scenes that might have coordinated that sort of thing. But in professional mediumship circles, a lot of times people believe that it's really not very ethical to just kind of go up and approach a stranger and say, "Hey, I have a reading for you," because not everybody wants to be open to that. And so, I'm assuming that behind the scenes there was some sort of permission given, or maybe even on the spot she asked for permission and they had a chance to respond, and that didn't always make it into the show. So I just want to kind of give her some credit there. Now, in my case, I do have pretty strong boundaries. So when I'm doing work, I open up to spirit. When I end a session, I close down. And I don't have any problems going out into crowds and dealing with, there may be a lot of energy there, but I tend to do okay with it. Now, of course, I do like to be open for pop-ins if there's something that's especially important. Kelly, duck, I like to be open for pop-ins, but for the most part, I don't go out and just read random strangers unless there's a good reason to do so.
It almost seems like a violation of energy if you would just kind of tune in without permission.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's why I like to say that there was probably permission given behind the scenes, and it was just cut out for television purposes. I've seen the way she works, and I can just identify enough of it in me that I believe she's legitimate. But it's just, the way things are done for television might be a little different.
Now, you mentioned having really strong boundaries. For anyone that's interested in developing mediumship skills or even just psychic skills in general, talk to us a little bit about how important boundaries are.
Yes, absolutely. So I believe that everybody who is involved in any type of energy work needs to build a strong foundation first. So that's going to involve doing a lot of work around being grounded. It's going to involve work around energetic cleansing and clearing of spaces. And then it's going to involve work around those boundaries and setting up your psychic protection. I can tell you one thing that I do, like every morning when I'm meditating, or if I'm preparing for a client session, or if I'm facing something that may be challenging. I always like to do this particular invocation slash affirmation where I say, I surround myself in divine white light, encompassing universal love, joy, healing, and protection. I freely radiate universal love to others while allowing myself to be affected only by positive thoughts, feelings, and emotions. With ease and grace, this or something better. Thank you.
And of course, the more you do it, the stronger that becomes, right?
Yeah, I mean, anything that you're doing in an energetic realm is just like when you're working out in the physical realm. If you're working out that muscle, you're strengthening it. If you are having the neurons run that neural pathway, you are strengthening that neural pathway.
Do you have any words of wisdom for anyone going to see a medium who wishes to receive messages?
So one thing is try to be open-minded. Every reading is a little bit different, and the people who come through may be different. The pieces of evidence that come through may be different. So try to be just open-minded and go with the flow. Now, having said that, I have seen a benefit when, even though you're open, you'd really like to hear from your Aunt Myrtle, and even though you're open to all the pieces of information that may come through, you'd really love to hear about that particular ring, or, you'd love to hear about her frog collection, something like that. If you could kind of have several things in your mind, and then don't be disappointed if the ring or the frog connection doesn't come through. But if you can have kind of a mental list of things that you would like to hear, that can be very meaningful when something on that list comes through.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that you can even ask Spirit for a sign that whenever you see that sign, you know that that person is there with you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You can communicate with spirit, whether it's asking for signs or, having conversations, like especially before a mediumship reading, you can talk to your Aunt Myrtle and say, "Hey, Aunt Myrtle, I would love to see you. I'd love to hear from you, during this session. And if it's possible, I'd love for you to bring up the ring or the frog collection or all these other things." And what I find is, for me, I get a lot of times people will say, I'll bring up something random and they'll be like, "Oh, I asked her to bring that up."
I thoroughly believe that Spirit is always talking to us.
Yeah.
Do you connect with your own family and loved ones on the other side?
I do. I do. I often will connect with my own loved ones, and it'll be just at random times where, I see something and I think, "Oh, that reminds me of my mother." And then I'll feel her energy and I'm like, "Oh, I love you, Mom." They'll pop in at random times when I'm thinking of them or if I'm speaking about them. So yeah, that does happen. Now, I will say that even though I'm a medium, I still grieve, right? So being able to get a little sensation of energy or a little flash of an image or something like that, that's beautiful and it helps with the grieving process, but it doesn't replace having them here with us in the physical world, of course.
I'm curious, Kelly, is there anybody in my energy field today who would like to come through?
Well, we can open up and see if we get anybody. So bear with me one moment and I'll just see what I get. Okay, I am getting a feminine energy and I am getting an older generation than you are. This feels, actually, I'm going to say it feels like you may have a few spirits here, but they're both two or three spirits, but they're female and it's an older generation. So this might be mother, grandmother, great grandmother. But let me see what else I get. Hang on just a moment. Okay. All right. So I was getting a sensation of a sort of a unique audio sensation just now. So I feel like I want to talk about somebody who had trouble hearing. So somebody may have had a hearing loss towards the end, but I was picking up on that. I was getting my symbol for prolonged. Stretch Armstrong. So I was getting my symbol for prolonged. So someone was sick for a while before they passed. Hang on just a moment. All right. I do feel like I want to talk about the letter M. So somebody has an M name. This could be an M-A-R. Um, is there a Mary or a Margaret? Who has the M name?
You know, Kelly, my mom's name starts with an M and she does have an R in it as well. She always had worn headphones to watch TV so she could hear it and not have it on so loud that it would interfere with other people in the room. So I find it's really interesting that that came through. It certainly makes sense to me that it could even be like a little muffled, the hearing sense, because of the headphones. So it's really wonderful that you're connecting with her. I do also have a great aunt, Miriam, that's crossed over. I wasn't super close with her, but she would go grocery shopping.
All right, so your mother's name starts with an M. And did the other things I was saying made sense as far as her?
Absolutely.
Okay, so she had difficulty hearing. She was sick for a while before she passed, and she has the letter M. All right, very good. So yeah, I strongly feel that your mother is here. Let me see. Hang on just a moment. What else she wants to say? All right. Okay. Yes, your mother wants you to know that she comes around you often, but she says you already know that because you're big into this realm. But she does come around you often. She's confirming that for you. She's confirming that she can hear you. And it seems to me that she's been in spirit long enough now that you don't speak to her aloud as much as you once did. She says, but you speak to her in your mind sometimes in a pointed way, and that she can hear that as well. So she wants you to know that she's confirming that for you. And then one other thing, is she the one, I feel like I want to talk about butterflies. So, do you see butterflies and you think of her, or is there somebody else that the butterflies make sense for?
Well, I do see lots of butterflies, and mostly for me, they just represent the magic of life, right? I don't know that I connect it with a specific crossed
That's,
over loved one.
that's very good. So, you see butterflies and you associate butterflies with the magic of life. Your mother wants you to know she's with you. And of course, she loves you very much. And she's in particular, when you see the butterflies and you're feeling that energy of appreciating the magic of life, she's with you at that very moment. She also wants you to know that what you're doing helps people. Um, it inspires people, and she's so proud of you.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you for checking in.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, where can we send people who want to know more about your work?
Well, the website's going to be the number one place that people can find out about me. You know, my name, Kelly Palmatier, is one way you can find me, but Palmatier can be a little tricky to spell sometimes. So my company name is Channeling White Light. And that's because I'm channeling white light towards a better world. So you can go to my website, channelingwhitelight.com, and that's a good place to learn all about my services. I charge sliding scale rates. You can read my reviews, watch video excerpts of my actual readings, see my full availability, and book appointments directly online.
I love it, Kelly, because as you've been talking, I have periodically seen white light all around you. It's
Oh,
perfect.
thank you. What a beautiful thing to say. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for being my guest today.
Yes, it's an honor.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. Come visit me at thoughtchange.com, pick up your copy of Learning to Listen, and we will see you again next time. Bye for now.